5.3, that
Mhm.
should be an info piece under 5.1. All it is a news release about the grant.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any other items? Okay, so with that one change, unless anybody objects, we'll take that as unanimous agreement. The agenda, thank you. Adoption of the minutes. I was just looking at them myself. Any comments or changes proposed? No, hearing none. If I don't hear any objections, we'll have unanimous approval. Okay, moving along. Public comments. Steph, I don't think I see anybody for public comments. Are we anticipating anything? I don't see any.
I don't see anyone.
Members of public? Nope. Okay, so we'll move along. Right to number 4. So 4.1, Housing Accelerator Fund update and next steps. Over to Daniel.
Awesome. Thanks, Robin. I have just a presentation I will talk you through. Let's see. All right. Housing Accelerator Fund. So this is now going back in time a little bit, but in March, so since our last meeting, Government of Canada and Bowen Municipality announced that we were successful in our Housing Accelerator Fund grant application. Yeah, and so the big picture, the agreement will provide up, and I always put in this language, up to 1.6 million in funding from the federal government to us based on our ability to deliver, to essentially permit building, like housing on Bowen. And another condition of the funding is that there are 6 initiatives that we committed to undertaking on a sort of prescribed timeline, as well as a condition of the funding. And then in the grant applications, that money is slated to be used to fund the construction of affordable housing projects, which is very exciting for us here. So the 6 initiatives that we had identified in the grant are these following 6. So reducing parking standards for affordable housing, and I'm looking to bring the initial discussion of that to our Advisory Planning Commission meeting at their next meeting. And so some of the background for that, like we've seen in a few housing projects, most recently like the Birch housing project and the apartment buildings on Bowen Island Trunk Road, both received variances to reduce parking. And part of the rationale being lower demand for parking in the Cove, lower parking demand for affordable housing. And so this would be trying to actually just update our land use bylaw to have reduced parking standards for affordable housing and save that step of needing a variance. The second one being implementing development cost charges, and I have that slated for staff. So I know staff have been working on a DCC for sewer charges for a while and trying to get the sort of the math of that in place. The third one being waiving public hearings for affordable housing. And I bolded that one because I want to talk to you about that one today. And that one is one that we'd slated for the Housing Advisory Committee to provide some input on early. The fourth one is e-permitting. So we've been working for a while now on trying to get an e-permitting system up and running, first for building permits and then for development applications, which has taken much longer than anyone has wanted to, but hope to do something with that soon. The fifth one is creating a process to partner on affordable housing. So CMHC and the Government of Canada has been very clear that this initiative is not necessarily the granting of money, but our initiative is trying to create a process for how we would be providing funding. So, you know, up till now, it's been fairly informal. We also haven't had significant money to partner with people on affordable housing. So thinking about, okay, if we actually have up to 1.6 million coming in, what sort of process do we want for us to actually then award that? And the sixth one, create a process for disposal of city-owned assets for the development of affordable housing. And so that's finding a way to identify municipally owned land that is available for affordable housing and what would be the process for actually disposing of that land. And some of that we see the work we have update later tonight on the TOMO work on lot 1. Am I sharing the right screen, by the way? Are you seeing my initiatives?
Yes.
Yes.
PowerPoint? Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So then this initiative's 3, waiving public hearing for affordable housing projects in alignment with the OCP. And this description was, we would amend Bowen's affordable housing policy to include a provision to waive public hearings for affordable housing projects that conform to Bowen's official community plan. So this initiative we put in the grant last summer, with the idea being that at the time, council had the ability to decide to waive public hearings for rezonings that conform to Bowen's official community plan. So that was what was in our grant application. And then funnily enough, in the fall, the province in their Housing Statutes Amendment Act of 2023 included outright prohibitions on holding public hearings for rezoning applications that are consistent with an official community plan, and if they are completely residential, or if the residential component accounts for at least half of the gross floor area. So as of that bill coming into effect, for any rezoning application that comes in now that's just for a housing development or over half of it is housing, we are actually straight up just prohibited from holding a public hearing if it's consistent with the OCP. If it needs an OCP amendment, then it still needs and then it has to have a public hearing to amend the OCP. So I've talked a bit to CMHC about this and saying, like, it seems like most of the work of Initiative 3 is actually already done. Like, in the sense that if somebody came today for an application that was consistent with the OCP, but they wanted to rezone to do affordable housing, we are just straight up not allowed to hold a public hearing, regardless of any policy. So I put together this little thing showing, okay, when is a public hearing required? So is it consistent with the OCP? If it's not consistent with the OCP and needs an OCP amendment, it requires a public hearing. Okay. If it is consistent with the OCP, then we would ask, is the whole development residential? And if the whole development is residential, yes, then we cannot hold a public hearing. If the whole development is not residential, then we would ask, is at least half of the development residential? And if at least half of it is residential, we can't hold a public hearing. So then we're looking at, okay, if less than half of the development by gross floor area is residential, then we're into this area where council may hold a public hearing or may decide to waive it. And so that is really the language that we would be trying to put into our affordable housing policy to follow Initiative 3 would be for rezoning applications that are consistent with the OCP, but fewer than half of the development is residential. To meet the Initiative 3, we would be saying, okay, these are things that we then want further by the affordable housing policy to say council may consider waiving because of the affordable housing component. So was that clear to everybody? I know this was sort of...
I have a question, Daniel. Yeah. So is this at least half is residential, or at least half meets the definition of affordable housing and is residential?
Like in terms of when it requires a rezoning or when it requires a public hearing, it's just, is it residential?
Okay.
Yeah.
Ask a question.
Sorry, go for it, Fritz.
Can the council, many times there's amendment made to the OCP, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if council wants to be ahead of an OCP review, then can council do that?
Like council could amend the OCP.
Like right now?
Yeah.
So then, because an OCP review can take apparently more than a year, maybe 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to, if you want to implement this.
Yeah, so like this year, I've had 2 applications come forward to seek to amend the OCP. And one of them, council said, no, this seems like a significant change for the neighborhood. We want to defer this until after the OCP is complete. And the other one, council said, this change seems in keeping with the neighborhood. We're okay with it proceeding in advance of the OCP review.
Okay, and that amendment, how long does that take for an OCP amendment versus, let's say, rezoning or whatever?
Yeah, like I guess process-wise, it takes, essentially amending the OCP is like one extra step in that it needs the Islands Trust approval. The executive committee of the Islands Trust needs to approve the bylaw. So one answer is like in the process wise, there's one extra step. And then there's also like a higher threshold required in the Local Government Act for OCP amendments. You're supposed to have like early and significant, early and meaningful public consultation throughout.
Okay.
And then the other changes then for these applications now, like if the application that's going forward, if it was consistent with the OCP, it's a residential rezoning, we would not be able to hold a public hearing. But instead, because it's an OCP amendment, we are required to hold a public hearing.
Right.
So
Okay.
the combo of those things means it's like a couple months longer than just a straight rezoning.
Oh yeah. Okay, but maybe if I ask another question, like if you go in this beautiful diagram, which is amazing, when you go to if at least half of the development by gross floor area with a question mark, because I think if it's by gross floor area and if there are other restrictions, there's a chance that the units get larger. That you have there's pressure to make the units larger, not smaller. Is that recognized or?
Yeah, or at least
Daniel, is that gross floor area the province's wording?
That's the province's wording. That's what's in like the Local Government Act now.
So we can't change that.
No, we can't change it in terms of like that's the trigger for not being able to hold a public hearing. So like for example, the apartment building at 510 Bowen Island Trunk Road, like the new one, has commercial in the basement, but it's not more than half, right? So if that was actually a rezoning, but consistent with the OCP, this would say we're not allowed to hold a public hearing. Whereas like the pub development has residential upstairs, has commercial. The commercial is more than half of the building. So in that case, council could hold a public hearing or could decide to waive a public hearing.
I think this relates a bit to the parking bylaw. I say that as an architect, okay? Because at a certain point, you want to figure out how many parking stalls you can provide and how that relates to floor space that can be permitted. So there's more behind that convenient, simple 50% than maybe is anticipated.
Yeah.
Do we count parking areas in floor space?
No, it's more like how many parking stalls you have to provide, and it's normally really difficult and very expensive to provide, particularly when you have to go underground, which is more and more a need. The last number that I still have is $80,000 per stall. That really adds up.
I guess my question was if the building was 2,000 square feet of residential, 500 square feet of commercial, and 500 and 1,500 square feet of parking, then you don't, is the parking counted in the total floor area of the building?
No.
So
Typically
you wouldn't meet your 50% test then?
Typically parking is excluded.
Well, I think we're a little odd. I have a funny feeling we might include it.
We might, and I guess then it'd be an argument though that if it's like, if that parking is to serve the residential units, then maybe there's an argument that if we're counting like the whole floor area of the whole building, including enclosed parking, but if it's the parking to fulfill the residential, then it would make sense to include that in that, is half the development residential. Well, if half of it is residential or parking for the residential and less than half is commercial and parking for the commercial, I guess if we're going to include it.
I was just going to jump in. That is something we do have on our work plan to make some recommendations to revise the land use bylaw. And that's definitely something we can incorporate, right? The definition of floor space or the definition of floor space for calculations relevant to X, Y, and Z. So yeah, we can definitely make some notes on that. I think that is definitely worth clearing up for sure.
Okay.
And I think too with the parking piece, because I know that was initiative 1 and I was going to bring it to the APC as a first step, but then I think it would come to this committee as well. So good thing to raise and have, And then I'm just going to plow ahead to talk about, so then we have an affordable housing policy, and it's the one it talks about. The intent is to guide staff and council in deliberations with development proponents on the delivery of affordable housing, provide clear objectives and targets, create a level playing field, create a mix of affordable rental and affordable ownership housing on Bowen Island. And so it's the one that talks about the goal of developments providing 15% of their floor area as affordable housing. And it defines affordable housing. So it says non-market residential dwelling units that may only be owned or rented under the terms of housing covenants registered on title in favor of the Bowen Island municipality. So then what I would be looking to do would be to include wording in the policy to talk about, to support development of affordable housing, Bowen Island municipality will consider waiving public hearings for rezoning applications for projects that are consistent with the official community plan, where affordable housing makes up some percent of the gross floor area of the project, or it's where affordable housing makes up some percentage of the residential gross floor area of the project. And that's kind of what I wanted to see the Housing Advisory Committee thoughts on. So with this, I guess it's like, so one thing is obviously if just the straight up housing makes up more than 50% of the gross floor area, then that's a category that we would not be holding a public hearing. We would not be allowed to hold a public hearing in any case. But so then I was thinking, well, is the goal then, it's like, well, if affordable housing is, maybe it's 25% of the whole project, that's enough to say, okay, we want to encourage that. We want to say that's something we're not going to hold a public hearing for. Or the other option would be to say, well, maybe if it's a percent of the gross floor area of the project, we say we want to consider not holding a public hearing. So so that would be like the Bowen Island pub, where I believe, and I always get the numbers mixed up, but I believe they have 3 residential units in the pub building. And I believe they're actually all under a housing agreement that they are affordable rental. But conceptually, if a building like that was proposed and it had 3 rental units and 2 of them were affordable housing, they were proposing that those would be the affordable housing pieces of the project. And we would say,
Danielle,
well,
Danielle, can it be both? Because
yeah,
I think it can
yeah,
be both actually, because
sure,
I think for commercial buildings, you have to you need to have a different formula than for residential buildings. Because for residential buildings, the percentage is too high. The building may not be able to be built because it gets too expensive.
Yeah.
The developer. And in the other one, it's kind of a bit the same. There has to be a percentage or a unit count somehow that a developer will choose actually to avoid a public hearing that may be controversial.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there has to be a real incentive, and then I think it will happen. And then you have to watch the parking again.
Yeah.
I had a comment, and I think maybe it's becomes a question probably for Robin, which is if we're moving in the direction of creating a housing authority, and I assume that the housing authority would have some role in managing this sort of inventory of affordable rentals. I'm sort of wondering, is it does it become sort of a friction point or sort of a difficult to manage if the housing authority is getting one home here, one home there, sort of sprinkled all over the island versus sort of like a cash in lieu, at least a cash in lieu option where we might say, well, you know what, we would rather just put it towards, for example, the Birch project and just build a lot of inventory there that we can manage in one place. And I have a slight leaning in one direction, but I think you have a lot more context than I do.
And actually, sir, before I answer that, one thing that's interesting that comes up with that is we have that on our work plan, and I think that's something we'll talk about later. Nigel, with you're going to kind of head is coming up with a cash in lieu policy, because we did a bunch of work on that last year. So it'll be interesting and should be addressed. Maybe you could on this slide, if a project, so let's just imagine a pub type proposal comes in, they are, let's say they meet whatever number we make up, but let's go with 15% because that's the current policy. They meet that in terms of they're doing cash in lieu. So they're meeting the affordable housing policy with a 15%. They're doing cash in lieu instead of building the units. does that still apply? Do they waive the public hearing because they're meeting the intent and the policy? They're not physically building the units, but they're meeting the policy by providing cash in lieu. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't think there's an
Yeah.
answer today necessarily, but that's something as we work through this that should be thought about. Agreed on the comment about parking, like there should be noted somewhere, does this exclude parking or whatever? And sorry, Nigel, back to your thing. I mean, I think we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. I don't know if it's 100% relevant to this, but more the discussion of the housing policy, the affordable housing policy, and yeah, whether units, like you say, spring up in different developments in different spots, or I don't think we can mandate it one way or the other. I think it's just giving options, like, because if people want to build them, great. And then if they want to do cash in lieu because that's easier and more effective for them, great. I presumably it goes into the housing reserve fund, or, that's a different discussion. But off the top of my head, in terms of managing, the only challenge is really enforcement, because there'd still be a covenant, whether the covenant's to Bowen Muni or some different housing organization, doesn't really matter, to whatever governing body is going to oversee it. The challenge is enforcement. So like, for example, right now, I'm just guessing, I don't think anybody's checked on, the pub units or anything to say, hey, like, how much are you renting these for? So I think it's just not happening because there's no real formal mechanism, mandate, capacity, So I'm hopeful that's something we can address. Again, it's on the agenda later today, but I would say my quick answer is no, I don't think so. Bowen's small enough. I think there's going to be a low number of units, overall. I don't think it's like we're going to have, it's like we're City of Vancouver and there's like 2 units here and 2 units there and 2 units there. I think Bowen's small enough and development is slow enough in for these ones that having a couple units here and a couple units there, I don't think it's a reason to sort of mandate something different or make different regulations. I think it is what it is. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got a question about all of this, because there's something, and I couldn't find it looking last night. The province is not keen on us negotiating amenity dense bonusing and stuff. So I thought we couldn't do that anymore with all this new housing regulations, and we were going to have to create that amenity bylaw.
So I was going to bring that up in our like cash in lieu discussion, maybe, is that there's a new housing bill that came out in the spring that replaces like some of the old density bonusing piece and sort of elaborates on like inclusionary zoning. So between the two, it has like, yeah, essentially it's a way to, by bylaw, do like some sort of cash in lieu policy, but it has like super strict requirements in terms of like, you need to prove that you have done the math and you're not just, you're not setting the rate at a rate that will be like prohibitive. So it's kind of closer to a DCC process where it's like, I think I forget exactly the details, but I feel like it needs ministry approval.
Yeah, so we can't just negotiate the construction of affordable housing or cash in lieu, or anything else without having done this bylaw thing anymore. So I guess that's sort of our question, is how much is our policy sort of becomes a bit mute.
I think so to some extent. Like, I think we can't
require somebody in a rezoning to provide 15% gross floor area anymore.
Or at the very least, we'd have to consider with the new bylaw. Yeah, we may need to enshrine it by bylaw.
And that, I would just remember everybody complaining about that one new bylaw they were talking about, but it didn't have affordable housing or money for it in their list of things. It was more like infrastructure.
So that was, in the fall, they had like an amenity, there's ability to an amenity cost charge by bylaw. And it has a certain number of things you can charge for, and affordable housing isn't one of them. And then in the spring, they've introduced new legislation that I meant to check if they've actually adopted already. Which lays
something
out
about
like
density bonusing
for affordable housing. For affordable housing and inclusionary zoning requirements, where you can require like a certain percent in a zone be affordable housing, or you have to then provide a cash in lieu option for that. And you have to set the rate based on like a formula. So
So a lot of it you can do through zoning, right, Danielle?
yes, you're now, so I guess some of that is the whole change of the idea. By 2025, we need an OCP that reflects a 20-year projected housing need. And we need zoning to be updated to match, to provide pre-zoned to match the 20-year housing need. And so then in that, then they've said, okay, well, now there's this inclusionary zoning ability. So I guess you would say, okay, the OCP says we need X number of units. We make sure that's in the OCP, and then that's in the zoning. But then as part of doing that zoning, then you would say, but we want to ensure that whatever percent, 15% of it is provided as affordable housing. You could do that, is my understanding, in the zoning. So you'd say this 10-acre lot, in the OCP, it says it could be 4 units because it's a great site and whatever else. It fits with what we want to go, where we want to go. But we would try to zone it in a way that says, well, but one of those has to be an affordable, meets these criteria, or you provide this cash in lieu. So a lot of it means it's like a lot more sort of upfront work. And thinking to get it right, as opposed to, I'm just gonna stop that. As opposed to now where we can sort of be a little more reactive to applications that come in and see you have to sort of plan it all out in advance, and you've less ability to then be like, oh, we didn't think about it for this lot. It's like, well, that's the bylaw and that's what it allows everyone to do.
So if I may ask another thing, like how easy is it to create a new zone, like a custom zone, like almost for a specific project?
I mean, that's what we've done a lot. That's why we have a lot of CD zones.
Yeah, so then does that help? Just take projects through CD?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of then the provincial legislation is trying to not do that. So trying to say you have to include in your zoning as of December 2025, you have to pre-zone for everything.
It's control, right?
Yeah.
Numbers, statistics, control.
Or just getting it built more easily and quicker and taking away some of the
Yeah.
red tape.
Yeah. Well, same thing, yeah.
Well, and I think not only red tape and the associated time and risk,
Yeah.
right? Like, because that's the
Yeah.
idea. Like, it's a huge risk and investment of time and energy to do a rezoning at this point. And like many people don't have that, you know, whether they don't resources or the stomach to go through that process. So yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the purpose of this is to facilitate more housing. And on the face of it, looks like it would achieve that, right? If you already know that piece is zoned for X, and if you want to, here's the formula for the cash in lieu, like it's pretty easy to do your math and have some expectation of what's going to be approved, right? So yeah, I mean, I think it's a good way to go. Okay, any other, Daniel, did you have anything else you wanted to present on this item?
Ron's got his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, no, sorry, it's in my cursor.
Oh, okay.
No, I think
yeah.
then maybe for the next meeting, then I'll try to bring just revised affordable housing policy to the committee for you to review actually in place.
Great.
And knowing that, so for this purpose of this, it's like just to meet that initiative that we want a policy that says we'll consider waiving public hearings. And that then we'll be bringing a parking piece as well. And then, thinking about density benefit zoning and inclusionary zoning and cash in lieu options is all sort of a bigger piece. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay, well, thanks. If nobody has any other questions or comments right now, we'll keep going to the next item. And okay, apologies. Well, okay, so it's the work plan. 4.2 is the work plan. I'm just sort of looking through everything. I'm thinking, oh, I should have, when we were talking about the agenda, maybe moved 6.1 up to 4.2. So it may be that jumps into this discussion. So apologies in advance, and then we can just skip 6.1 when we get down to that. So the work plan, and I don't know, Steph, if you have it to share or if people have it to look at. I've just kind of done a bit of a reshuffle and add as we've been talking and everything.
Robin, the work plan went to council and was approved by council. So I guess if we're shuffling, then we have to go back for a reapproval.
Okay. So I don't think I was shuffling too much. I don't know that we committed to like a priority order. So if we're shuffling order, hopefully that doesn't change anything. And then we're adding in an item which was specifically asked for by council. So I think that's okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, Steph, maybe if you're able to bring it up, and then we can kind of work through it.
I'm just the spinning wheel for me at this
Oh
end, but
shoot.
it's
Okay.
on its
Okay.
way.
Do you want me
know
to
what?
share the
Keep chatting.
PDF?
Sure. Yeah, if you've got
Would
it.
you want to be working on it while we're talking though?
I can a little bit in my, but either
I've
way,
got
if
it.
we can get something on the screen, at least we can all look at it. Like I say, I've
got
been
it,
changing
Megan.
mine, so I don't have the original one anymore. I've been messing around. So I guess let's see, because some of them I feel like they're kind of, collapsed for a lack of a better word, like the cluster zoning thing. We've acknowledged the last meeting or two. We know that that's oh, okay, so we did have numbers and dates. Okay. So say for example, number 5, if we look at this, cluster zoning, yeah, it's kind of basically it's going to go into the OCP process, which is number 4. So I almost feel like we just, strike that out. It's just kind of collapsed into number 4. And then
Don't strike it out. It's in a plan that's been approved by council.
Okay, so do we just mark it as complete
I'm
then,
just putting italics on it.
It's not
Okay.
complete. What I would do is it's going to start in 2024 as part of the OCP process. So you've got your
Okay.
notes part of
Okay.
OCP. So I would just leave it the way it is.
Just leave it. Okay, sounds
Yeah.
good. And then I can probably do a quick report on workforce housings. Like that was a meeting with the CEDC. So I had that meeting. I went in and filled them in on some of the work that we're doing as the Housing Advisory Committee. I think I updated on some of the work that Birch is doing. And yeah, and just had a chat with them and asked a few questions, everything. I don't think, and Steph, jump in if I'm missing or forgetting anything. I don't think anything concrete in terms of action items came out of it. It was just sort of a, liaising. They filled in with what we did. They filled me in with kind of what they were doing in terms of a survey, and really just a like, hey, let's keep each other in the loop. So yeah, I don't think that there was any major action items that came out of that, but certainly hopefully between myself and the chair of that committee, we can just keep each other in the loop, and it might come up also during the OCP review process. I don't quite have a idea of what that's going to look like and how involved committees are going to be or what that looks like, but maybe that's another opportunity for me to touch base with that committee as well, just to keep us all connected.
Okay.
And let's see. So OCP review, that's ongoing. Well, I think maybe Daniel, I assume you or some other member of staff will come to the committee when the time is right for us to participate in any kind of OCP review or anything. Like that's not an action item for us. That's somebody will come to us and tell us. Yeah. Okay. So that one will just wait to be updated.
Yeah,
and I'll
Robin,
say
can I add a comment there?
Sure,
I've been,
yes.
I'm on the steering committee for the OCP, so there's a bit of a link there as well, I guess.
Oh, great. Okay, so yeah, we can see as the process moves forward how this committee is updated, whether it's through Daniel or Fritz or how that's going to work, and then we'll rely on you to say when the Housing Advisory Committee gets involved or what you need comment on. So great. Okay, so we can probably put that down maybe under who, Steph. We could put Daniel and Fritz, I guess, and we'll just kind of see how that goes.
I'm also the council member on the steering committee.
Oh, great. Okay, so Daniel, Fritz, and Allison. Perfect. Look at that. We're very well represented. Woohoo! Okay.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Okay, so that one's been addressed. Land use bylaw review. We did talk about that a little bit today. So I feel like that's something, maybe mid towards late 2024. That's something we can pick up.
I was going to say for number 3 and number 1, so cash in lieu and land use bylaw review density bonusing. Maybe it makes sense at our next meeting if I want to go over the new provincial bill, which is Bill 16, because it has sections on density.
That's the one.
Density benefits zoning and affordable and special needs housing. No.
Yeah, that's
zoning
the one
bylaws and affordable and special needs housing. Yeah, so it essentially addresses both of those things and makes it more prescribed and more complicated. So it would give me a good opportunity, I think, for me to read it in depth if I know
Dig-
that there's a committee I have to present it to. So
Yeah, dig into it a little bit. That would be
Yeah.
great. Yeah, so if that works out for next meeting, that would be fantastic. So that'll work on number 1 and number 3. And we'll hear back from Daniel on that one next meeting. Great. And then number 2. So this is that review of the affordable housing policy? Oh, sorry, is that that would be, we just talked about this. Would that also review
that
the
might
affordable
also
housing
tie into this
policy?
Bill 16, how it changes
Yeah.
and the changes last year. So like I talked
Yeah.
about it today because I just want to make this one change so I can tell CMHC that yes,
Right.
I've met the initiative, but
Okay.
knowing that, okay, we need bigger changes probably in relation to provincial legislation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So
Sorry,
that
what was that
sounds
last
like
piece?
they'll,
Which, I'm sorry,
Sorry,
what was
number-
that last piece?
Number
So
2.
Number 2, thank you.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, that makes sense. So that'll sort of follow. We'll do the 1 revision pretty quick just to get that ticked off the list and done. And then there'll be another round, sort of phase 2 of some other revisions, but they'll be tied in with these other legislative changes that are coming down. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So it sounds like 1, 2, and 3 are quite closely linked. And generally Daniel's kind of leading that one. So
Okay.
we'll wait to hear from him, and then we'll see again once you've presented it, and we can kind of see how it works out if you need support from us and how we can help. So.
Okay.
Okay. And then I think then the other one is number 9 that's been on my radar with Nigel. And I think what we were thinking was Nigel might head an initiative to like a working group to kind of work towards this in terms of funding for the Housing Reserve Fund. And I don't know, Nigel, if you had any thoughts, if you wanted to say anything more about it.
I do, and in fact, it probably ties into Daniel's cash and lieu stuff. So and I've already met with Daniel about this.
Yep.
Got some really great feedback about sort of I presented a few ideas, and Daniel gave really good guidance on which ones would work really well and which ones probably had some pitfalls.
Okay.
So I'll take that on. I don't know if it needs to be a subcommittee or a working group, but
Yeah.
happy to take it
Well,
on.
yeah, so I guess maybe is there anybody else on the committee that's interested in that and would like to help in terms of funding and working to see how that all fits in with this new legislation and the affordable housing policy and those kinds of things? I imagine it would be over the next few months, Nigel. I don't know what timeline you
I
have
can
in
do
mind.
it solo too. I mean,
Oh,
as
yeah,
long
yeah.
as I have access to Daniel, which he's already been great about it. So yeah.
Yeah,
Here,
just putting it out there for
Lois
anybody
is-
else. Yeah,
I'll
Lois?
be part of that with you.
Oh,
Great.
fantastic.
Okay.
Okay, so Nigel and Lois, and not hearing anybody else jump in. Do speak up at later on or offline if you are interested, but it sounds like Nigel and Lois. That's great. Always good to have 2 different brains thinking about things, different perspectives. That's great. Thank you both. So have a work. Let me know if any progress has been made. You want to update us at the next meeting, or we might have a full agenda next meeting. Perhaps the next one after that, but it also might tie in with the discussion we're having with Daniel. So just let us know ahead of next meeting if there's anything to update on.
Okay.
And I think these other ones were on our radar, 7 and 8. So I think 7, let's leave that on radar because that's kind of a much bigger piece, and I think we've got so much else, a higher priority on our plate that let's just keep it on the radar. And
Well,
then
Robin, I think that number 8 fits in with all this provincial legislation too.
yes, exactly. Sorry, did I misspeak? Number 7, let's keep it on the radar. Number 8, agreed. It's basically fitting in with kind of 1 through 3. So it might be that, I don't know if we want to at later on work to kind of reorder this, but agreed. I think number 8 is definitely tying into all that legislative and bylaw work. So we can have that all relate together. And then the one to add is the one that I'll be heading up, which is also number 6.1 in new business. So I'm just going to bring it in now because it really is part of the work plan and something we're going to work on. So council, and I'm just going to look at the language in their strategic planning session. So it's in the last page of our.
Robin?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's okay.
Well, I can, it's just a simple one-liner. It says create a working group to explore establishing a community-owned housing organization. So I think it's a little too premature to put it on our radar. I mean, it's of interest to us. I was going to bring it up under the council updates, but it's council says create a working group. So it's not a referral to us. We're not the working group. from that wording on mine. So I think we need some clarification.
Oh, it was made very clear to me when I spoke with Councillor Wake that that was the intention, was that the Housing Advisory Committee would form a working group to,
Okay, so
yeah.
I haven't got a lot of detail, and I can't remember from my notes from the session. It wasn't, I know the housing, so let's just wait to add that.
So
Because-
in my reading of it, in the excerpt from the regular council, which is like say the last page of the agenda, it says, Councillor Wake commented that the work plan, oh yeah, sorry, I'll read it from the beginning. Council received the minutes of the Housing Advisory Committee meeting held March 8th, 2024, and the 2024 Housing Advisory Committee work plan for approval. Councillor Wake commented that the work plan should include the forming of a subcommittee for a housing organization as adopted in the Council's 2024 strategic plan update. And then it was moved and seconded that Council approved the Housing Advisory Committee work plan. So
okay, but
what was communicated to me.
I don't think we actually added anything to the work plan. So
Okay.
let me check on that.
Okay, so where would we get clarity on that?
Well, I'll go back and talk to Sophie, and we can check the recording of the meeting and stuff, and just see if we actually added it to the work plan.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if we tentatively pencil in starting a working group and getting going on it.
Why don't we just put it on the radar?
Well, Councillor Morse, respectfully, it's urgent. Like time is of the essence. We have a lot going on. There's we've got funding coming through. Birch project is moving. We've got the Lot 1 project with Tomo. And when I look at the and apologies of the notes when Daniel was showing his presentation, a number of those, 5 and 6 on those initiatives in the Housing Accelerator Fund, which is plan a process to partner on affordable housing and create a process for disposal of city-owned assets. Both of those would potentially be addressed with a community-owned housing organization. So again, given that we're on quite a timeline with the Housing Accelerator Fund and wanting to get those things completed, my preference would be to get going sooner than later. I don't see any reason to delay unless there's a clear directive from council they don't want us to do this. I felt that there was, in my communications with people, there was a pretty clear directive. So I'm happy to, we can pencil it in pending, confirmation. But I don't see any reason to wait.
Hey, Robin.
Yes, yeah.
I just wonder if in a group like that, you need some specific expertise that maybe is not present in our group. Like, give me an example, like an appraiser or like a land appraiser or a cost estimator or a experienced contracting firm or something like that. Is that the intention? Maybe that the group is more varied, or to make it successful, right? Do you want to listen to? That's more than
no, and that's a fantastic point, Fritz. So I've been in discussion with Councillor Wake, and he would like to be part of the working group. I also chatted to Ron because he has such excellent research skills and interests, so he's interested in being part of it. And I wanted to put it out to this group to see if they would be interested. And we did put together a draft of what that working group might look like and what its objectives might be. And so that was what I was planning to build on in forming the working group.
So the group is much larger than the Housing Advisory Committee?
No, in fact, I was hoping to keep it quite small and nimble. And then the idea being, agreed with you, Fritz, we maybe don't have the expertise. So the idea is the working group itself would be relatively small. And then we would then be going out to other experts to connect with them and ask their advice. Because agreed, we don't have that expertise. I don't want to speak for Ron because he hasn't committed anything yet, but one of the things I'm hoping he might be able to tackle is doing research on other organizations like this. There's a bunch of other housing authorities that have been formed. Tim and I both have connections with some of them. So doing that research and what they've been done. And I think Allison's flashing up a little pamphlet a document that's been put out there. So
that's
reading those.
A document from the provincial government launching and maintaining a local government corporation, which is what the process you have to go through if it's a housing corporation, and you need an approval of the inspector and all sorts of things. So it is not something that will happen in in a month.
No, it's like a lawyer.
No, I certainly had no idea, no anticipation we were forming a housing corporation in a month. I was hoping we would form the working group this month to then explore, is it a housing corporation? Is it a nonprofit that has a memorandum of understanding with the municipality? Like, I don't think there's any foregone conclusions as to what form that organization takes, certainly not in my mind. I was hoping that we would explore all of those options, get legal advice, get advice from all sorts of things, look at those kinds of documents. That's the work of the working group, right? Like, to actually do that work, read it, do the research, and then hopefully make recommendations based on that, the expert advice. Because yeah, we definitely need legal advice and documents like that, because I don't know any side of it like that. So that's what I was hoping, is that we would form that group today. And then we could go through, maybe that group could work through this document that was created earlier, and maybe then next month come back with this to this committee then. So it's kind of like a terms of reference, but I don't want to call it that formal. It's just sort of like a, I don't know what we'd call it. Just, basically, hey, here's what we plan to do. This is the direction we're heading in. What does everybody think? And then maybe this committee sort of says, yeah, that sounds good, or contributes their thoughts and ideas as to what maybe we could change. Steph, yeah, go ahead.
Can I suggest that maybe this group can put together the idea of the working group and then send that idea to council? And then if Councillor Moore's concerns can be addressed at the council table, if council says that's great, go with it. Or council actually had something else in mind. So we'll just follow the process in place.
Okay, that's a great idea, Steph. I forget about that process stuff. That's perfect. So maybe what we could ask the Housing Advisory Committee today is, do we make a resolution, Steph, or something?
A recommendation.
So recommendation that the Housing Advisory Committee, I don't know, add to their work plan the formation of a working group. And I'd have to look at the language of the thing from council. Hang on, I hid it away here.
Like, I have a working group pursuant to the 2024 Council Strategic Plan update.
Yeah, and for forming a housing organization. So a subcommittee to explore, however it might be worded, but you get the gist of what I'm saying.
Explore establishing a community-owned housing organization.
Perfect.
And explore the formation of a working group to address.
No, Steph, the wording in the, just take the wording out of the
strategic plan
and just put in the front that the Housing Advisory Committee be requested to create a working group to explore establishing a community-owned housing organization.
Recommend that council direct the Housing Advisory Committee to add to their work plan and explore the formation of working group language from the strategic plan.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And maybe just 100%
let's put the numbers on it, maybe. Sorry.
Could we put 2024 work plan just to be 100% clear?
Yeah.
That it's
or in 2024, maybe at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, I will do that. And the members comprising.
Well, forget the members. Just that I thought you had it right, that the Housing Advisory Committee.
Yeah, I think that's probably enough for now. Yeah. Establish a working group, or whatever we want to call it, a working group.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Could involve people that weren't on the Housing Advisory Committee too. Working groups don't have to be just 100% committee members.
Well, can we say that in the resolution so it's really clear for council what the intention is then? Okay, comprising HAC members and non-HAC members. I'll fix the wording.
But don't we already have wording for working groups in our committee?
I'm trying to be super clear. There's a lot
I don't think it
things that
hurts to be clear.
The council doesn't know about, so it's just right there in front of them in the recommendation, all the information they need to have an informed discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. Could you share your screen? I know it's not 100% words correct,
not 100%,
because
and it's not on
that's
the Word
okay.
doc. It's in my
shoot, sorry.
So I'm just gonna the Housing Advisory Committee recommend the council directs the committee to add to their work plan explore the establishment of a working group to the language from the strategic plan, comprising both HAC and non-HAC members.
Can it, Steph, can it not be like explore create, but just to create?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Group. That you only need one explorer, which is the quote from the strat plan.
Okay, I see. I don't have that strat plan in front of me. I searched it and I didn't get the 24 version. That's why I'm
you have to actually
Okay.
go into the website under government and everything else. I found it.
Okay. I'll get rid of that first explore, and then I will send a draft around right after the meeting.
Okay,
I just put in the chat the
Oh,
the
great.
language in the strat plan.
there you
thanks,
go.
Daniel.
Perfect.
Hmm. So yeah, so council direct the Housing Advisory Committee to add to their 2024 work plan, create all that language.
I'll put it, okay.
Create a working group to explore establishing a community-owned housing organization. So any
Seconder.
thoughts or discussions? Sorry, Greg?
He
I was just
seconded
gonna,
it.
I was just gonna second.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll move it. You've seconded it. All in favor? Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. That's unanimous. Excellent. That's exciting. And let's go back to our agenda here. That was the work plan. Thanks, Steph, for all that work. It was really helpful to visually go through it and have you highlight it so we can kind of tick stuff off. It looks like I think we're in pretty good shape, but a lot of work. We'll see how that your presentation comes through, Daniel. On the next one, I feel like there's like 4 or 5 are kind of combined into this one big kind of super super item on the work plan. But yeah, it's great. It's all quite intertwined. Okay, so we'll go on to the next one, which is items 5.1, which is the Birch update on lot 3. This is the first time we're having this update. This was Councillor Morris requested that we have this as like a standing item, which is great. So this will be likely a standing item on our agendas. So the update I have for the project on lot 3, which if you're familiar with it is on Miller Road behind the behind the health center, the recently opened health center, which is super exciting. So we have allocated the lot at the back. And so that project received approval for funding from BC Housing. Apologies, I can't remember. I think it was a month or 2 ago now. It was a little hush-hush at the beginning. We couldn't kind of share everything. And then it kind of was announced. And then we hadn't had a meeting in a while. So yes, we're part of the Community Housing Fund. And what that metric is that the end result will be a 24 units apartment building. And the mix of that, I don't have it off the top of my head, it goes from studios, 1 bed, 2 beds, there's a couple of 3 bed units. And the mix of affordability levels, and this is prescribed by the funding source from BC Housing, is 20% very low income. I can't remember the formal term. So people who are on welfare and disability and all that, who get a very low amount of housing amount for their housing each month. So it's a very low rent for low income people. That's 20% of the units. 30% of the units is what's called low end of market. So it's meant to be just sort of average working people, but at the lower end of market. So still kind of in that bracket of what a market rental rate would be, but at the low end of it. And I believe that there is a formula as to how that's calculated, but I do not know that formula off the top of my head. And then the other 50% is what's called rent geared to income. And so that means qualifying people, and they have to apply and provide financial background information and everything. If they qualify, their housing is subsidized so that they only spend 30% of their income on rent. So, for example, a prime person, excuse me, to apply for that housing would be a elder in the community who was on a fixed income from a pension or from OAS, CPP, the government pensions, those kinds of things. They have a fixed amount of money, which, I mean, if you're on the government pension, is not a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And so the idea being that you would apply for that housing, and if you were accepted, only 30% of what you actually get as your income is what your rent would be, and the rest is subsidized by BC Housing. So that one I'm actually quite excited about, because I think, I mean, the low income is also fantastic, so we don't have really anything like that on Bowen, but that rent geared to income, I think, is going to have a really great impact, because that'll be, I'm assuming 12 units of the housing will be in that bracket. So very exciting. And if I hadn't made it clear before, I think we did update on this a while back. Birch has partnered with the Lookout Health and Housing Society. So they're in fact the lead on this. So if you're not familiar with Lookout, look them up. They're based on the mainland. I think on the North Shore is their sort of main base, but they're all throughout the Lower Mainland. And I think they even have some projects in some smaller communities as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. And they also have a connection with Bowen for a number of years. They've been doing outreach, and I know a few years back when the emergency cold weather shelter was put into operation in the winter, they were involved with that. So they have fantastic experience and already a connection with Bowen. So a while back we partnered with them. They were the lead on this application, and I think it's safe to say they were a very big part of why it was successful. So it's a really great partnership. So they will lead the process. Birch is still part of it. We're a community partner. We're actually having a kickoff meeting on Monday. So next month, I'll have a better update for you on clarity for everything moving forward. But we finally have this kickoff meeting with BC Housing and the whole team. And so we'll see how that works out and clarify Birch's role. But what I imagine it will be is kind of community liaison, potentially municipal liaison, working out the tenure of the land, because in general I think everybody agrees it's going to be a lease to look out, and so it's just to be confirmed, because so clarifying that'll be something I think Birch will help with to facilitate that, and if community, when the time comes for community engagement. And also I'm imagining we're a little ways away from it, but figuring out, we had started on this a few years back, Birch, but it kind of got interrupted when we didn't get in that first round of housing, is figuring out the application process, the selection process for tenants, those kinds of things. So who gets to apply, who gets prioritized, creating a really clear objective process so everybody will understand what to expect and how that's going to happen. So that's another thing that's on my radar that Birch could be a part of, or the project. So that I think is the update. Any questions?
Yeah.
Fritz. Yeah.
Roland, is there a requirement for accessibility, and maybe
Yes.
in specific in that area that is used quite a bit by people who are visually impaired, like one of the counselors? So is there, like for instance, would the lower floor be reserved for? This is just an example, okay? Would the lower floor be reserved for people with visible, like with the sign says on the road, watch it, there's blind people here. Like I have to maybe tell you that every once in a while when I walk on Millers, or I try to help people that are visually impaired, and it's actually really interesting if you do that, because you just step into their world, and then you think if something is accessible at the main floor level, and it would take care of them. I think actually a lot of the persons that you see walking around, they don't have very good housing at all. You know what I mean? They are really, and housing is never, I don't think they're, what I understand is that there's that house somewhere on Millers, I don't know which house it is, that is overpopulated by people that are visually impaired, and somehow they make it work. But then you think from the community could do so much more. Or there's that committee, right, for accessibility. I think it should be brought to them and say, from what would they suggest that maybe can be, because you would help people so much, like there's so many restrictions on their daily life, and you think from, well, if the building sits right in the perfect location for that. I'll give you another example. If you walk on Miller, right? And for instance, now you see these improvements, there's a fire hall and there's all kinds of things. But the fire hall is the widest driveway ever, And what was actually much easier for them is when it was gravel. You walk on the gravel, you can hear that you're walking on the gravel. Then suddenly you're on a piece of concrete. If you lose your sense of direction, you're kind of toast. And I think should there be something? Should there be something even experimental that Bowen does that no other municipality does? I'll give you an example. Maybe there could be, you have these tactile warning strips, right? If you cross a road, right? So you don't step on the road and you get driven over. But there could also something that guides you, because what was guiding people on Miller was actually the fact that there was a gravel walkway. You can hear yourself walk. There was grass on the right side. There was something else on the left side. There's a power pole every so many feet. It goes on and on. So then some of that is actually disturbed. The worst area, because that's a fellow there, is actually when they try to. There's actually an interesting example. If you have a minute, if you walk towards the ferry, and on your left-hand side is the concrete blocks, and on your right-hand side is that high curb. Okay, that's really clear. Now you come to the end on the ferry side, And it is the most difficult spot for people that are visually impaired ever. You know, there's all kinds of things in different directions, like one dock number 2, then you have the ferry ramp, and then you have another dock, and then it goes on and on. So, and then the pavement is like a total mix of different materials. So I think from, we can certainly improve things. And then I just kind of think about it. It's in that area. When is the next opportunity?
Oh, no, that's great feedback. So to answer your initial question, and I was just trying to look up the numbers, and I don't have it in front of me, but there is definitely a number of units, and I don't think it's small. I think it's 20, 25% are to be fully accessible. And then, so designed for wheelchair use, and universal, and I think then the remainder are meant to be universal access. But why I'm a little hesitant, partly I don't remember off the top of my head, and partly it's all going to change now, because as Fritz knows, we just bumped into a new building code that has some additional accessibility requirements that weren't in the last one. And the funding for this BC Housing funding has certain requirements around accessibility. We're hoping to layer on some federal CMHC funding that also has accessibility requirements, and then the new building code. So the plans that we have now, which are schematic design stage, will evolve and change. But I really appreciate your comment, Fritz, about specifically the visually impaired population, because we do actually have a real representation of that on Bowen. And so, I've made a note to either connect with, because, Councillor Jurgensen and that connection directly, and or the municipal, I don't know the title, the accessibility committee.
Accessibility committee.
Yeah, so connecting with them and seeing, there's definitely an opportunity right now, because we're kind of launching into sort of a new design phase to see if there is anything that we can do that would be, like you say, innovative, or sometimes they're just such simple little changes that you can make early in this that will improve things. But yes, the idea is that the entire building, I believe, is accessible. There's going to be an elevator, ramps, all of that stuff. So it's not even just the ground floor that will be accessible. Every floor will be accessible. And I appreciate that feedback. I think that's a great idea to really engage with that community on Bowen and see if there is something we can incorporate into the design. Yeah, that's great.
How much was the funding, Robin?
Oh, I do not recall off the top of my head. I'm going to have to look back at it. And sorry, everybody, I was not as prepared. I will come prepared next time, maybe with a more succinct update in terms of the funding. It wasn't insignificant. I think it's something in the ballpark of $2 to $3 million as a grant, in that range. And then it's also there, we sign a housing, oh gosh, I can't remember the language now, a housing agreement with them, basically for like a 60-year operating agreement gets signed to keep those subsidies going, to maintain that 20%, 30%, 50% mix. So BC Housing agrees to give subsidies for the next 60 years. And then we also will be getting, depending on where we get the loan eventually, because I think BC Housing now has a program, CMHC federally has a program, there's preferential rates for mortgages. So that's another financial benefit that we'll be getting as a nonprofit. Discounted rates and like 50-year amortizations or whatever, some way to make it much more affordable.
Who builds it? Who builds it?
We don't know yet. We have to design it, and then it likely has to go to tender, and then we'll figure that out. So because I assume it's going to, because it's BC Housing and public money, it'll be similar to, say, the municipal process, where it has to go out to tender to, a certain number of bidders and be bid competitively, that kind of thing. Any other questions?
Yeah, a couple.
Yeah.
In looking at the press release, it's really very interesting in the backgrounder. It lists the community name. So it's for ours, for example, it says Bowen Island, 1033 Miller Road, 24 homes for families and seniors in partnership with Lookout Housing and Health Society. And then the next, Burnaby, it has the same wording for different, but they all say in partnership with. And it's all for the community in partnership with. So is Daniel going to be invited to the first planning meeting? So, because it sounds like the municipality is sort of involved in this somehow. Right? Well, we are, because of the lease too. So I just didn't quite understand what they meant by in partnership with. So.
Yeah, I think it's, as far as I understand, we'll be continuing as we have been, which essentially Birch being the liaison. So Birch, gosh, I'd have to check on where we're up to. We certainly a number of years ago signed a memorandum of understanding with the municipality to work with them on leading this process for this particular piece of land. And then when it came up to partner with Lookout, I believe that was also approved by council. So in my mind, Birch is sort of the representative of the municipality, as has been kind of how we've operationally been doing it for the last 7 years. And so it had not been on my radar to change that at all, but that's a great reminder that maybe we need to, and it would have been part of the process in the next few months to formalize things, because again, like I say, we have to formalize the lease of the land and all of those kinds of things and formalize those roles. So after the meeting on Monday, I'll probably have more information, so I can certainly update this committee at the next meeting. And then if needed, I can get in touch with Daniel and we can move forward with what those next steps are to clarify those roles. Mm-hmm. And you had another question, Allison?
I can't remember what it was.
Okay.
I think it may have been covered off of one of Fritz's.
Okay, sounds good. Any other questions? I'm just going to check our agenda and our time here, see where we're up to. And just jump in if I don't see you and waving your hand. Where are we up to? We're supposed to wrap up at 11, so we've got 20 minutes left. Okay, so I might move on then to 5.2, which is the update on Tomo spaces and Birch for Lot 1. Again, another standing item we're proposing to have. So the update I have for that one is right now we're in sort of the first round of engagement. So if any of you have seen it, I actually be interested to see who's seen. We've been trying to advertise the survey that we put out to the community just to get feedback on sort of the existing zoning and if that's still the right direction to head in. So I don't know, has anybody seen that? It
Nope.
was in the undercurrent and it was on Facebook and no? Okay.
So because it's muni land and the municipality does a newsletter and sends out information, can you not talk to Sophie about getting it out in that?
Yes, honestly, I actually just have not had time. It's been an incredibly busy 2 weeks for me with everything else going on in my life. So it's been on my radar. So what I might do is, because it's supposed to close Monday, but there hasn't been a lot of uptake, and as evidenced by this group, most people have not seen it. What we might do is extend that closing date, and I'll get in touch with the municipality. I'll just do it right now after this meeting. To see if we can get it out into that newsletter. We did, I think it was in the undercurrent. We did ask for it to be in the undercurrent. I sent it through. I don't know if I missed that copy.
I don't remember seeing it either.
Okay, I'll have to check. He did tell me it was in it. And then not this past week, like not literally, I think it was supposed to be, anyway, sorry, I'll check on that. And then, yes, and it has been on, social media and stuff like that, but the undercurrent was sort of our way of getting it out to the non-social media folks. So I'll contact BIM, see if we can get out there, and then I might extend it at least a week. So we'll go till May 20th. And the other thing on that is we're planning to have 2 small invited groups for like engagements or sort of focus groups, for lack of a better word. So just if people like to discuss with them the plans and have just a more robust discussion as opposed to just sort of clicking answers on a survey. So it's on my list of next week to contact people who in the survey. You could express interest if you wanted to be part of it. You can also just email to express interest, which has been in our posts. And so then we would invite people to come and have those small discussions and get feedback on kind of what's happening for Lot 1. Yeah, so that is, I think, my update. And then the next step of that is to gather that information. And then we have reached out, although we haven't firmed up a date or a time to then have connect with council again in sort of probably end of June, sometime in July. And I know Councillor Wake has a preference for it to be a committee of the whole, but we haven't confirmed that yet. It's sort of pending what that update's going to look like. So yeah, that's our next steps.
So one more thing, you got a grant from the Community Foundation.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. We did. We got a grant, a $5,000 grant from the Community Foundation towards this project, which is great. So that will help fund. We haven't determined exactly because we did ask for a much larger amount. So we got a smaller amount. So we're going to decide where to essentially best target the use of that, which yeah, off the top of my head, I think it's going to be some kind of engineer or another to help tell us something about the site, whether it's, yeah, we haven't decided, we don't know yet if it's septic or if it's road or if it's whatever. There's a number of challenges on that site in terms of getting, density and a lot of housing and whatever other uses might be there. So through the year, we'll figure out where to best use that those funds to get a good result. Not seeing
And that was Birch that got the grant, right?
correct in partnership
For
with
the project.
municipality.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, through the municipality. Yeah, the municipality was our charitable partner in that one. Yeah. Any other questions or comments, and do let me know if between meetings, shoot me an email, and if you say, hey, could you update us on this, next meeting or whatever, you have thoughts and questions, and yeah. Okay, seeing nothing else, I think 5.3
Robin,
yes.
I remembered my question for 5.1.
Yeah.
It was timing. Like I thought your plans were all done, but it sounds like they're not. So
no, we had schematic design complete, and then we
Okay.
did go through the variants. I think that was last year,
Yeah,
and that was
yeah.
approved. So no, I'll have more information after Monday. So next meeting, I can definitely update on timing. I think it's safe to say we're talking, years, not months. So I don't know if it's 2 years or 3 years. Like I can't commit at this stage. I don't know. It's hopefully not 5 years, I don't think, but it's not 1 year. So in terms of it being like open and occupied and ready to go. So I don't have a timeline at the moment as to when the building will be complete. But like I say, we have the kickoff meeting Monday. So hopefully we'll have a bit more information then.
Did the CMHC grant have any timing and what's got to be done by X to get the money, or?
We don't have a CMHC grant at the moment. So it's in discussion as to.
Oh, I'm sorry, the BC Housing Grant.
Well, no, we are literally working with them in this process. So like
Okay.
they are pretty much steering the ship kind of at this point in terms of timing. So we've been waiting for them the last couple of months since the announcement. So they're kicking it off now, and really it's them and Lookout who will be steering and driving everything.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So I think so 5.3 we've already talked about in another point. 6.1 we've already talked about earlier. There were a couple of information items, the strategic plan update, and then information for the council. Oh, is there anything in 7.2? Anything for us to? I think these are just information items. So
I'm just trying to make sure that you guys are connected with what's happening at council that's housing related. So
okay,
there are
great.
3 excerpts linked.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so I guess new business or any other final wrap up questions before we finish up? Yeah, Ron, go ahead. Oh, you got to unmute though. Oh, Ron, can you make sure to unmute? We can't unmute you. Yeah. Oh dear, it's proving elusive. That's all right. Hopefully it's the bottom left corner for you, Ron, maybe, or it might. Sometimes the little bar thing floats around with Zoom. It could be hard to find.
No, I had it on the
Yeah.
top in my iPad the other day.
Got
Got it? Oh, great. Yeah,
Yeah.
we got it. We can hear you.
All right. Two quick points. First of all, congratulations to Daniel and anyone else who may have been involved in getting the money from the Housing Accelerator Fund. And Daniel, could you tell us, please, what is the $1.6 million going to actually be used for?
Tiny bits of it were used for some of the initiatives. So a little bit towards e-permitting, a little bit towards the work for development cost charges, and the rest was to go to be available as grants to build affordable housing.
Thank you. That's all.
Okay, yeah, great question. And actually, I have a follow-up question. Daniel, and I apologize if you said this earlier. From memory of when we were doing the application, it sort of gets released in like little bits and pieces, or it's sort of, and it's also that's a maximum amount that like is based on performance. Essentially, we said we're going to do these things. If we do them all, or if we do 80%, we get a certain amount of funding. Is that right?
Yeah, so they provide it in 4 advances of like 413,000 each time.
Okay.
And I don't remember if it's the last 2 or the last one that get clawed back if we don't deliver the building permits. And so I'm very aware that like our projected building permits is partly based on like the 5-year average and based on partly our like post-COVID building boom, and that like our permit application has been slower this year. So it's highly possible we don't make the numbers and we don't get the 1.6, we get it clawed back because we haven't delivered the units.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. But we will get a fair bit. It's not like
But
we're
we
gonna
will
be
get a
knocked
fair
down.
bit.
Yeah.
And I believe my understanding is like at least the first 2 and maybe the first 3 we get regardless.
Great. Yeah, which is significant. Yeah. Congratulations. Thank you. That's great. Okay, any other last comments? Where's my agenda here? I keep
One
moving it out of the
follow-up
way.
on that. Yeah.
Mhm.
And the half, Daniel, when is the time up? I mean, I'm just thinking of the timing of, because I think we were counting the Miller Road project in the building
Yeah.
permit for units. So that's partly,
The effective start date is like the end of January. That's when the contribution agreement was signed. And that's when our accounting starts from. And then it's permitted within 3 years. So if that was 2024,
so
January
January
27.
2027. So
Yeah.
Robin, you have to have a building permit before January 2027.
Yeah.
Okay, I will make that my mission.
There we go.
Yeah, that I feel confident in. I building permit by then, absolutely. Building fully finished, not sure I can commit to that, but building permit, I think I can be pretty confident in. Yeah. Okay. Anything? Fritz laughs as I say. Building permit. Now, good question. Is it issued or submitted? That's the other question.
Issued.
Issued. Okay, so that takes us back a bit. Okay.
Wow. Good
Yeah.
for you. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so if there's no other comments, we'll wrap up a few minutes early, which is always great. Our next meeting it was here Friday, June 7th, 9:30. Just checking in. I'll just check my calendar, make sure there's no conflicts and we're all good. Yeah. So hopefully everybody could make that. And we will see you in 4 weeks by the sounds of it. And then, yeah, please do be in communication in between if there's questions or comments or thoughts. I feel like we're gearing up. There's a lot potentially happening this year. So yeah, it's very exciting.
Great.
Okay. Thanks
Awesome.
again, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Good to have you here.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.